everyone. Welcome back to Helpo Helps with the HKDSE exam. In our last video, we looked at the reading portion of the exam. In today's video, we're going to look at the writing portion. So let's jump right in. The most common problem with the writing portion is poor fluency. And this is actually the most common problem in writing in general. Now, this is not only a problem for non-native speakers. Native speakers can also struggle with poor fluency. So I think the first thing we want to do is just look at a few tips for having better writing fluency. So pay attention to grammar and spelling, particularly to subject-verb agreement. If the subject of the sentence is plural, the verb must also be plural. If it's singular, the verb must be singular. Now, I have a general rule. It's not going to apply to all subject-verb agreement situations, but it is going to apply to most of them. To make a subject plural, you normally add an S. To make a verb plural, you normally remove the S. Alice runs a marathon. They run a marathon. You can see here, Alice runs, singular, one person, Alice, runs. She does the one thing in the verb, she runs. All right, and then we have they run. They, plural, run. You can see here, the S has been removed. Now, again, this is not always the case, but it's going to be often the case. So we have the second part of tips for writing fluency, and that's going to be organizing sentences in a logical fashion. In order to do this, you have to remember to organize your ideas logically. One point must be explained before the next can be understood. Now, remember that it's important to read over your answers and make sure that they make sense and they flow in a logical progression. I know sometimes with a timed exam, we feel like we don't have time to think and organize our ideas before we write, or to review them after. But if you take the time to think about them before and review them after, it's actually going to take you less time to write the answer, because you're not going to be fumbling around for ideas and thoughts. And so you're not going to have as much correction as you review. So let's look at the sample exam. We're going to be reading the choosing. And as we read this, we're going to take a few moments and think on it as we're reading, because it's very important to think about what you read when you're reading. Now, I had to remove my webcam for this portion of the class because we don't want to cover up any of the reading. The choosing. We were first equal, Mary and I, with the same colored ribbons and mouse-colored hair, and with equal shyness we curtsied to the lady counselor for copies of Collins' children's classics. First equal, equally proud. Best friends too, Mary and I, a common bond in being cleverest, equal, in our small school's small class. I remember the competition for top desk, or to read aloud the lesson at school service, and my terrible fear of her superiority at sums. I remember the housing scheme where we both stayed, the same houses, different homes, where choices got made. I don't know exactly why they moved, but anyway they went. Something about a 3-apartment and a cheaper rent. But from the top deck of the high school bus, I glimpse among the others on the corner Mary's father, muffled, contrasting strangely with the elegant greyhounds by his side. He didn't believe in high school education, especially for girls, or in forking out for uniforms. 10 years later, on a Saturday, I am coming from the library. Sitting near me on the bus, Mary, with a husband who is tall, curly-haired, has eyes for no one but Mary. His arms are round the full-shaped vase that is her body. Oh, you can see where the attraction lies in Mary's life. Not that I envy her, really. And I am coming from the library with my arms full of books, I think of those prizes that were ours for the taking, and wonder when the choices got made that we don't remember making. So now let's look at a sample question. What do you think is the writer's message? Give reasons to support your views. Now, because I was thinking about what I was reading while I was reading it, I have an idea of what I would answer for this. So I think that the writer's message is one about consequences of choices. Now, this is a good statement, but it needs support to show how we came to this conclusion. So we're going to take a moment to look back at the poem in two parts and show how a logical progression of our answer can occur. So first in the poem, we see that the two girls are equal. The author spends a lot of time pointing out that they're equal. She wants to develop the message that choices change everything. So in order to do that, she really needs to lay out how equal the girls were. Now, at the end, we see where she's going to move in the change because she says an important statement, where choices got made. And this implies that choices are not always ours, or we don't always have a choice in our choices because they're often made for us by family or by situations. So this is going to bring about the idea of the opportunity for choice. So now that we've analyzed that, let's take the first part of the poem into consideration. So the writer's message is about the consequences of choices in our lives. So I think the best thing to do is to take that information that we understand from the first part and develop a good, strong sentence. The author starts by exemplifying the equality of the two girls in school, showing them as making similar educational choices to be studious and excel. So here I've taken the information that we read and I've condensed it into a very logical, organized, and thoughtful sentence. This sentence develops an understanding of where we're going with our thought and supports the idea that consequences of choices is the main point that the author is trying to make in this poem. Now, let's look at the second part of the poem. In this part, the author starts to show the differences that are going to have an effect on the choices the girls are able to make. So that's the opportunity for choice. She indicates the different beliefs of family, as she's allowed to attend secondary school, but Mary is not. And as she points that out, she moves forward to later in the future. The girls meet, and Mary's choices have led to a happy marriage. The author's choices have led to college. Now, the author doesn't directly say that she's attending college, but she gives us some clues. As she went to secondary school, it's 10 years from the start of secondary school, and she talks about coming from the library. She actually says that twice, with her arms full of books. So we can deduce through the author's statements that she is in college. Now finally, the author exemplifies the point that choices make a difference by reiterating how choices are made. Our opportunity for choices is often influenced by outside factors, which we can see in the ending statement of the poem, when the choices got made that we don't remember making. So let's take the second part of the poem into consideration. Again, we're supporting the idea that the message is about consequences of choices. So we're going to condense information from the poem to support this idea. The influence of opportunity on choices is noted when one is able to attend high school and the other is not. Later in life, Mary is happily married and the author is attending college. These events show where choices have led each girl. The author ends the poem by commenting about the choices they don't remember making, which supports the idea that all choices have consequences regardless of how or when they are made. So let's look at all of that together and consider why this is a good answer. The writer's message is one about the consequences of choices. The author starts by exemplifying the equality of the two girls in school, showing them as making similar educational choices to be studious and excel. The influence of opportunity on choices is noted when one is able to attend high school, but the other is not. Later in life, Mary is happily married, and the author is attending college. These events show where choices have led each girl. The author ends the poem by commenting about all the choices that they don't remember making, which supports the idea that all choices have consequences regardless of how or when they are made. Now, there's much more that can be said if we were asked to analyze the poem, but it's important when we're answering our questions to stay focused on the task. And the task here is just to have a short answer about what we believe the message to be. So we want to be brief, but we also want to have a strong argument that supports our opinions. So take note of the logical progression of the idea. We have the consequences of choices. We have the girls are equal. Then there are choices that are made about high school. Then there are choices throughout life. And then they are here at this point in the story where one is happily married, the other is attending college. So putting these events in order, we see that that shows how choices have led to different consequences for each girl. And then we also see at the end of the poem where the idea is supported that they all have choices and the consequences are regardless of how or when they are made. So you can see how our ideas logically and progressively support the point that the author has a message about the consequences of choices. We can also look and see that our grammar and our sentence structure and our vocabulary are all very good, right? Now, vocabulary is something that can be very difficult because you often don't have an extensive vocabulary to use, and that's all right. But what you want to do is you do want to use as much of the vocabulary that you do have in your writing so that you can show how you've progressed and how you make connections throughout the English words. But I would caution you to make sure that you do understand the vocabulary that you use, because using vocabulary improperly is going to harm your score and harm your structure and fluency. So today we have looked at the writing portion of the exam, and I hope that all of these ideas have supported you in developing in your understanding of what to do for that part of the exam. In our next video, we're going to talk about the listening portion of the exam. We're going to address the common problems and build support for having a strong answer in the listening portions. So, see you next time. Bye.